Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the crunch point for Cabinet Minister Johnny Mercer. He has alleged that he's been in receipt of information from whistleblowers about potentially murders committed in Afghanistan by British soldiers, including in the SAS. And there's a major inquiry underway to investigate these potential crimes. And Mercer has been asked to provide the details of what he knows, including who he knows it from. He has argued that he cannot betray confidences and has refused. Now, the public inquiry, which has the same powers as a court in many ways, has made the point that they know how to maintain confidentiality, but they need the information. They cannot work with hearsay. In fact, the situation is especially bizarre because Mercer has for some time complained that the authorities have not investigated these claims, yet now that they are doing, he is refusing to cooperate. It's potentially a mark of his arrogance that he expects a senior judge to accept that not only his own information has been adequately validated and that it should be taken as gospel, but the inquiry cannot just take Mercer at his word, because even if they had no reason to doubt his honesty, I can think of a few, they cannot be sure that his own powers of investigation were sufficiently robust. Mercer has continued to refuse. He was given a final deadline to provide the information. Otherwise, he would effectively be in contempt of court and then could receive a large fine or imprisonment. Now, as far as I can tell, the deadline for Mercer to comply has passed. So it's now up to the inquiry to take action. Hard to see how a fine would do anything. They surely can't just fine him and then continue to allow him to refuse to hand over the information. Imprisonment, I suppose, would sound more sensible, because then presumably the sentence can be commuted if at any point he decides he'd like to comply after all. I can find no inkling of when the inquiry will act. Maybe it will have done so by the time this video comes out. But surely they can't let this drag on. So maybe we're going to discover that a cabinet minister will be going to prison within the next week or two. But I think it is worth saying this, maybe in Mercer's defence, it depends how you look at it, or more properly, recount another person's defence in the affair. Because I would imagine there'd be quite a lot of people would not mind at all seeing Mercer's smug face behind bars. He's quite an unpleasant man. However, I don't think we can wish people to go to prison just for being unpleasant. You know, whether we think prison is justified here has to be based entirely on how we judge this particular incident in isolation. Because in an article in the Daily Mail, a former army major whose life was destroyed by false allegations of this nature has launched a defence of Mercer. He has argued that, for example, investigations into the rapes that have been carried out within our military or the suicides at deep cut barracks, he says they wouldn't have taken place if the victims were not assured of anonymity. And that's true enough. They would never have come forward. But what I would say here is, so I can see this major's point. He has himself had his life wrecked by false allegations. He still suffers from PTSD as a result, according to the article. So he is inevitably going to be hugely on the side of this idea of anonymity so that other innocent people do not suffer as he has. So his feelings are entirely understandable. However, I would say two things myself about this. First, nobody is threatening anyone's anonymity. Public inquiries take anonymous evidence all the time. Quite frankly, a senior judge is far better at handling anonymity than some posh Herbert poncing about in cabinet anyway. They're more used to it and have the authority and experience to do so. The second thing I will say is that if Mercer is digging his heels in because he gave the whistleblowers promises of not passing their names on, he should not have done. Before becoming an internet gobshite, I worked as a teacher. Now, there would be times when students would come to you with sensitive information. Our training impresses upon us that we must never, ever agree to keep that information to ourselves. If they ask us to, and it does happen, if they say you can't tell anyone about that, I'm going to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone about this, we have to say that we are going to protect their interests But depending on what they tell us, we may have to tell others. But, you know, we do have to impress. Don't worry, you know, it will be treated sensitively. But at the same time, I can't promise not to pass it on to someone. So if Mercer has promised that he would not divulge certain information, he was acting unwisely. It's possible to protect victims and potential victims without withholding information from those who need to know. In this case, a senior judge who will have been chosen for the inquiry because they know how to handle sensitive matters like this. But it is worth noting the arguments anyway, because, you know, maybe some people will imagine that as much of an arse as Mercer is, how arrogant and unpleasant he is to people, he may, in this case, be acting out of some sense of nobility when it comes to this particular issue. You know, people can be complicated. We've been introduced to this recently, haven't we? Like Natalie Elpick, the most recent defection to Labour, very unpleasant towards asylum seekers, towards our European neighbours, has actually tried to frustrate the course of justice when it came to the criminal trial of her former husband. All of these are very much black marks against her name. But she campaigns against homelessness and for young people to have access to decent housing. But in Mercer's case, although he might in his own mind be acting out of a sense of honour in protecting the identities of people who wanted him to, he is also acting out of arrogance, because passing the information to the inquiry is not compromising anyone's anonymity. Very few additional people will learn of the names, and those people will be bound by confidentiality themselves, with far more severe legal consequences for failure than Mercer himself. And those victims are not going to see justice unless this inquiry can ascertain the information anyway. You know, Mercer, in my view, is unable to see the court cannot take his evidence without checking that it is valid. By refusing to cooperate, far from helping bring people to justice, he's actively trying to prevent justice, even if that is not his intention. So it's one of these situations. I would have some sympathy in this particular case if Mercer goes to prison for doing what probably he feels is the right thing. You know, it reminds me a little bit of Jeffrey Archer. A long time ago, there was a time when Tories did go to prison, you know. Jeffrey Archer went to prison for perjury. Now, he was quite a senior Tory. He was at the time, this was when the idea of the elected mayor of London was being bandied about. And he was going to be I think he was going to be the Conservatives candidate. But then this didn't happen because he went to prison. And I had a bit of sympathy on that occasion, because although Jeffrey Archer is a very unpleasant man himself, and but on this particular occasion, what he was lying for in court, he wasn't covering up corruption as such. He wasn't covering up anything that pertains to his public duties, so to speak. He was covering up what the media was saying about his private life, which turned out to be true, hence his denials was perjury. And but it was something the media probably had no right to publish anyway. So I felt a little bit I thought, yeah, he's an arsehole. So my sympathy was limited, but I did have sympathy in that case. And it could be the same thing here. You know, he's just an idiot, and he's doing harm to his own cause by his behaviour, but he's doing it because he's an idiot. If he promised not to pass on the names, he shouldn't have. He should have said that he would only pass the names on where it was legally required, and he would absolutely make sure that their anonymity would be guaranteed, which it would in this case. If he didn't, that's his failure. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.